Hello, Internet. Although I don't necessarily enjoy showing my face in places like these because, privacy concerns, I stumbled upon a piece of legislation recently passed by the European Union, and I saw a lot of misconceptions running around the internet. What kind of legislation am I talking about? It's a copyright directive passed by the European Parliament regarding the digital single market, and more specifically, it's Article 13. One of the things that we have to understand before we dive into Article 13 is how copyright actually works and how different it is in the United States versus the European Union. Although US copyright laws are fairly straightforward, Europeans, not so much. For this, I contacted one almighty source that will shine a light into all of this mess. Who is he? Alejandro Torino. He's the president of the Section of Information Technology and Communication of the Madrid Bar Association, arbitrator of the World Intellectual Property Organization. Also, he's a member of the Spanish Association for Entertainment Law and founding partner of the Association of National Advocacy Experts, ICT. I would continue listing all of his titles, publications, and accolades, but this guy has a lot. All you guys have to know is he's pretty legit when it comes to information technology, intellectual property, and copyright issues, which is what we're talking about. So let's talk about copyright. As noticed by Professor B. Hugenholtz, and I'm so sorry for butchering that name, from the Institute of Information Law from the University of Amsterdam, the copyright law in the European Union has been as following. The only use of copyright that is permitted, and I do want to make an emphasis on the word permitted, i.e. needs permission, has been the following: private copying, quotation, parody, library archiving, classroom use, and news reports. As for user-generated content, it's also very restrictive. Well, what's the problem with the Copyright and the Information Society Directive, which is the name of it? Well, as I said, it's extremely rigid. This doctrine doesn't account for the growth and development of media. The United States, on the other hand, is completely opposite. They're far more flexible in what is allowed and what is not allowed. Basically, copyright laws in the United States fall under the Fair Use Doctrine, which details that the use of copyright for criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, or research is not a copyright infringement. However, here in America, we detail a lot of exceptions that determine whether or not it is a copyright infringement or simply a misuse of copyrighted content. In comes the start of the show. Article 13. Our friends from the European Parliament decided that their very strict law should be updated, which is a really great thing. The reason? To harmonize EU copyright law and ensure that the law remains relevant in the face of the challenges raised by the recent surge to dominance of the internet. This is all according to Cooley LLP, which is a really prestigious law firm that is registered both in the European Union and in the United States. However, within this doctrine that seems fairly straightforward, there lies an article that has caused a lot of controversy in the internet, especially among social media giants like I mentioned, YouTube, Facebook, because according to them, it could potentially hurt platforms, content creators, and users alike. Here is the infamous article, and I suggest you pause this to read it because it actually is really short. There are some specific details that need to be highlighted in this article if we're going to actually talk about it. It says that service providers will have to take measures such as effective content recognition technologies to ensure the functioning of agreements with right holders for the use of their work. Said work is identified by right holders through the cooperation with service providers. It essentially says that social media platforms and service providers such as YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, SoundCloud is liable and responsible for copyright infringement. In the past, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, its section 512 specifically, detailed that service providers were not liable and not responsible for copyright infringement, granted that they do the following things. 1, that they were not aware of the infringing activity. 2, that they don't receive financial benefit from the activity. And 3, that once notified, the provider takes down the material from the site. Service providers were only responsible of notifying you when they were notified that the copyright infringement had occurred. No, they're perfectly and completely responsible of actually tracking down these copyright infringements and taking them down. But this is nothing that we haven't seen before. Remember Alejandro Torino, the guy that we talked about in the beginning? He said the following: if you want my personal opinion, I would say this is a part of the natural evolution of the regimen of responsibility on the internet. At the dawn of these media platforms, nothing was expected or asked of them. Once the internet began to grow, they were asked to eliminate content when they are notified of an infringement, but not to police or be vigilant. Now, the next logical step is to ask them to look over and police said content that could potentially infringe copyright laws. What about the issue of content ID technologies that might threaten and block or eliminate content that is not necessarily copyrighted and thus affect creators and artists? Well, according to Alejandro and a lot of other prestigious circles of IP in Europe, these are all excuses. These platforms have means. We see it with pornography or otherwise inappropriate content. These restrictions don't limit the ability you have to express yourself, because to express yourself, you don't need somebody else's work. If you have been in YouTube in the past few months, or even Twitter, Facebook, or any other social media, you might have noticed that they're kind of creating an apocalypse situation here, or at least painting it to be. According to Alejandro, it's because they don't want to be responsible. It's easier for them to remain a third-party neutral without any responsibility or liability. I mean, if you were a social media giant, would you rather put all of your money into content ID technology that could potentially eliminate a lot of the content that's bringing you revenue, or simply leave it to somebody else? A lot of the content that you see online and on the internet is sort of permissible. You see memes, you see other pictures, videos where people use other people's content. There's only so much policing one institution can do. There is an issue of whether content ID technology will delete more content than it's supposed to. At the end of the day, the internet is supposed to be a place of freedom and expression, but it's also supposed to be a place where you respect other people's property.